He read Karl Marx's Das Kapital, Hitler's Mein Kampf, before most kids his age could spell revolution. He claimed to be the reincarnation of Lenin, Jesus, even God. His voice was magnetic, his stare, unblinking behind dark sunglasses. Some called him a prophet, others, a monster. His followers would do anything for him, including assassinating a U.S. congressman and taking their own lives. This is the story of the deadliest cult massacre in modern history, where 909 people died under the spell of one man, Jim Jones. Jim Jones was born in 1931 in the small town of Crete, Indiana. His family was poor, really poor. At one point, they drove across the country just to find food and shelter. He was obsessed with death. He'd hold funerals for animals, not just pets, sometimes animals he killed himself. His neighbors remembered him as eerie, manipulative, and unusually charismatic. A child who both fascinated and frightened. But it was his obsession with power and ideology that set him apart. By the time most boys were playing baseball, Jim was reading Das Kapital and Mein Kampf. The ideas of control, revolution, and mass movement consumed him. Psychologically, you might call it a messiah complex, a boy growing up unseen, trying to make himself God. After graduating from college, Jones joined the Indiana Communist Party. That alone could get you blacklisted in Cold War America. But Jim was clever. To avoid suspicion, he found sanctuary behind the pulpit. He became a Methodist pastor, preaching messages of equality, racial harmony, and compassion. And people loved him. By 1956, he founded the People's Temple, a multi-ethnic, progressive church with real influence. It drew the poor, the ignored, the marginalized, people who needed hope. And Jones? He gave them more than that. He gave them purpose and a leader to follow. In 1965, Jim moved his church to California, to Redwood Valley, then San Francisco, and the People's Temple exploded in size. Jones attracted thousands, black and white, young and old, educated and desperate. He offered them a family, a future, a Messiah. Politicians endorsed him. The media praised him. He rubbed elbows with celebrities, governors, even vice presidents. But behind closed doors, things were rotting. Jones became addicted to drugs. His charisma turned manic. His sermons unhinged. He faked healings, staged miracles. He preached socialism, but lived like a king. To hide his drugged, bloodshot eyes, he wore black sunglasses everywhere, but claimed they were to protect him from the devil's fire. His paranoia grew. "They're coming for me," he warned his followers. "The media, the government, they'll print lies about me." He predicted they would come after him. And when investigative journalists started digging, Jones didn't panic. He told his followers, "See? I told you this would happen. I am a prophet, and they want to destroy us." In secret, Jim had already bought over 3,800 acres of land in Guyana, South America. It was his so-called promised land, a socialist utopia, free from racism, capitalism, and the government persecution he claimed was closing in. Then, almost overnight, more than 1,000 Americans disappeared. They boarded buses, planes, and boats, leaving behind their jobs, homes, and families. Jones warned them that the U.S. was no longer safe, that enemies were plotting to destroy them. Once in Guyana, their passports were confiscated, visas left to expire, and communication with the outside world was cut off. There was no going back. They were trapped. Jonestown was billed as a paradise, but it was anything but. Armed guards surrounded the compound. Food was scarce. Letters were censored. 12 turned 16 hours of labor in sweltering heat. Little food. No sleep. No communication with the outside world. Loudspeakers blared Jones' paranoid rants 24/7. Jones grew increasingly erratic, raving about CIA plots, nuclear war, and betrayal. In Jonestown, Jim Jones started a disturbing ritual he called a White Night. The first time it happened, he gathered everyone late at night in the pavilion. The loudspeakers crackled to life. Jim Jones had summoned everyone. They gathered, hundreds of them. He said, "They're coming for us. They want to take your children. They will destroy what we built here. There is only one way out." He held up a glass filled with red liquid. Flavor Aid. Sweet, bitter, unknown. He told them enemies were closing in, and the only escape was death. One by one, they drank a red liquid, believing it was poison. There was silence, then waiting. And finally, Jones revealed the truth. It wasn't poison. It was a test of loyalty. Many were shaken, but no one left. And from then on, it became a regular ritual. In November 1978, pressure from concerned families in the U.S. finally led Congressman Leo Ryan to take action. Finally, on November 17, 1978, he flew to Guyana, accompanied by journalists and a camera crew, promising an objective report. At first, Jonestown put on a perfect show. Music filled the air. Children sang. There was food, dancing, and beaming faces. All day long, it felt like a festival, a paradise in the jungle. Jones himself greeted Congressman Leo Ryan warmly. He appeared calm, generous, even proud. The camera crew interviewed dozens of residents. They smiled and said they were happy, grateful to be there. But it was all a facade, a carefully staged performance, orchestrated by Jim Jones. Some were too afraid to tell the truth. Behind the smiles, Jonestown was a prison in disguise. Then, just as the cameras were rolling, the truth slipped through. A young Temple member, hands shaking, crept up behind NBC reporter Don Harris. He pressed a folded note into his hand and vanished into the crowd. Harris opened it. 5 words. "Help us. Please get us out." That was it. In an instant, the illusion shattered. The music no longer sounded joyful. The smiles looked forced. And the so-called paradise began to unravel, thread by thread. People began quietly confessing that they wanted to leave. At first, Jones resisted. He didn't want anyone to go, but Ryan, playing to Jones' ego, convinced him. Allowing defectors would make him look more reasonable, even more popular, in the eyes of the American public. Reluctantly, Jones agreed. Suddenly, Don Sly, a devoted Jones loyalist, lunged at Congressman Ryan with a knife. He managed to cut him before being restrained by others nearby. It was a clear message. In Jonestown, leaving wasn't just betrayal. It was war. Despite the attack, Ryan remained calm. He assured Jones that the defectors would not damage his reputation and convinced him that allowing peaceful departures would reflect positively in his report. As Congressman Ryan and the group of defectors prepared to leave, they made their way to a small jungle airstrip where 2 planes awaited. But just before departure, one more person asked to join them, a young, devoted Jones follower who had suddenly changed his mind about staying. His name was Larry Layton. His request seemed suspicious, but in the spirit of peace, they allowed him aboard. As everyone began boarding the planes, a tractor pulling a trailer rolled up to the runway. Inside were armed gunmen sent by Jones. Without warning, they opened fire. Congressman Leo Ryan was gunned down on the tarmac, becoming the first U.S. congressman ever killed in the line of duty. 3 journalists and a woman trying to escape were also murdered. Several others were shot and wounded, scrambling for cover in the jungle, And that last-minute defector, Larry Layton, pulled a gun from his bag and opened fire inside the plane. It wasn't a change of heart. It was a setup. A deadly piece of Jim Jones' plan unfolding exactly as he intended. Back at Jonestown, the loudspeakers crackled to life. Jim Jones had summoned everyone. They gathered, hundreds of them. Jim Jones took the stage for the final time. On stage, Jim Jones stood tall under the pavilion roof. He raised both hands high like a preacher delivering salvation or a verdict. Jim Jones said, "They are coming for us. They want to take your children. They will destroy what we built here. There's only one way out." He held up a glass filled with red liquid. Flavor Aid. Sweet, bitter, unknown. He told them enemies were closing in, and the only escape was death. There was silence, then waiting. And finally, Jones revealed the truth. This time, it is actual poison. It's the final test, a final test of loyalty. Many were shaken, but no one left. "The Congressman is dead," he announced. "They'll blame us. The planes will crash before they land. It's time for revolutionary suicide." He had warned his followers for months that the outside world was conspiring against them, that death was the only escape from persecution. Now, the prophecy had arrived. Barrels of flavored Flavor Aid were brought out, laced with cyanide, Valium, chlorohydrate, and Phenergan, a fatal mix Jones had been quietly stockpiling for months, preparing for this exact moment. "We are born before our time," Jones declared. "They won't accept us." And then came the final command. "If we can't live in peace," he said coldly, "then let us die in peace." Some in Jonestown thought it was just another White Night rehearsal, another one of Jim's twisted loyalty tests. But something felt different this time. The atmosphere was tense. Paranoia was in the air. Circumstantial signs pointed to a chilling truth. This wasn't a drill. It was real. Only one voice dared to speak. Christine Miller, a mother, a believer, a fighter. "I look at all the babies," she said, her voice trembling, "and I think they deserve to live. As long as there's life, there's hope." But her voice was quickly drowned out by the crowd, many too afraid to support her, others too far gone to care. The ritual had already begun. Children were the first to die, cyanide squirted into their mouths with syringes. Parents held them, sobbing. Then they drank the poison themselves. Some adults followed willingly, clinging desperately to Jones' apocalyptic vision. Others resisted, crying, pleading, but were held down as syringes forced poison into their bodies. Those who tried to flee faced gunfire from armed guards. There was no way out, only death. When it was over, 909 people lay dead. There's a chilling 45-minute audio recording, now known as the Jonestown Death Tape, captured by the commune's own system, intended to document what Jones called their final act. On it, you hear the haunting sounds, babies crying, adults sobbing, and Jim Jones, calm and unwavering, insisting again and again, "This is the only way." When authorities arrived, they found 909 bodies, men, women, children, entire families. Over 300 were minors. Autopsies revealed over 70 had needle marks. This wasn't just suicide, it was a mass murder. Some survived, but only by chance. One had been asleep through the chaos. Another, with a hearing impairment, never heard the announcement. A few were far from the pavilion and didn't arrive in time. And the Jonestown basketball team? They were away in Georgetown for a tournament. Jim Jones started as a kid obsessed with ideology, became a man obsessed with control, and died as a deluded false prophet, leaving behind one of the darkest stains in modern history. But what killed 909 people that day wasn't just poison, it was blind faith. So the next time someone claims they alone can save you, remember Jonestown, and don't follow anyone blindly. But hey, you can follow Mystery Files TV. We won't hand you flavor aid, just facts, mystery, and a healthy dose of curiosity. If this story struck a chord, give it a like, tap that subscribe button, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the shadows of true crime. What would you have done if you were in Jonestown that day? Let us know below in the comment section. Thanks for watching.